Begin now with the prelude. I'm from Hans. I invite you to settle into your space and enjoy some music.
Can you see that?
Our opening words this morning are by white, queer, Unitarian Universalist minister and UUA Organizing Strategy Director, the Reverend Ashley Horan. How is it with your soul? This is the question that John Wesley, Anglican priest and founder of Methodism, was known to ask of participants in a small reflection group. I ask you because for me, this has been a hard week. So, beloveds, how is it with your soul? If your response to that question is anything like mine, I want to invite you to pause, take a deep breath, feel your feet on the floor with the force of gravity pulling us all toward the same center, rooting us. Now breathe again, and again, and again. And once you feel both rootedness and connection, hear this. You are loved beyond belief. You are enough. You are precious. Your work and your life matter, and you are not alone. You are a part of a we, a great cloud of witnesses, living and dead, who have insisted that this beautiful, broken world of ours is a blessing worthy of deep gratitude and fierce protection. Our ancestors and our descendants are beckoning us, compelling us onward toward greater connection, greater compassion, greater commitment to one another and to the earth. This morning, let us remember that together we are resilient and resourceful enough to say yes to that call, to make it our life's work in 1,000 different ways, knowing that we can do no other than bind ourselves more tightly together and throw ourselves into the holy work of showing up again and again, to be part of building the world of which we dream, but which we have not yet seen. And so let us join in that building together. Our opening hymn is Building a New Way. The lyrics are going to come up on the screen. Unfortunately, Jeremy is not feeling well today, so you're going to have to do with me leading you in singing. We are building a new way. I invite you to sing with gusto from home. I think you'll pick it up at least by the second verse. It goes like this.
Yes, normally.
We are building a new way. We are building a new way. We are building a new way, getting stronger every day. We are building a new way. And the thing about having to deal with me singing is that I always start too high. So now that you've heard it once, I'm going to start a little lower. We're going to try it again. Here we go. We are building a new way. We are building a new way. We are building a new way, getting stronger every day. We are building a new way. That's better. Let's do the next verse. We are working to be free. We are working to be free. We are working to be free of hate and greed and jealousy. We are working to be free. We can feed our every need. 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 Start with love, that is the seed. We can feed our every need. Peace and freedom is our cry. 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 Without these, the world would die. Peace and freedom is our cry. We will now have a chalice lighting led by our worship associate, Jeff Ordway.
You may now wish to light a candle at home or look in the chat for a digital chalice. And as we light our chalices, the symbol of our faith, at home or digitally, will you please join me in lifting your voices in homes across our city, country, and world to share our weekly words of affirmation. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace to seek the truth in love, and to help one another.
And let us share a centering moment from our Director of Religious Education, Jamila Batchelder.
Good morning. So my brother Sam is the quintessential overprotective older brother. And pretty much any time I've had any trouble with anyone in my life, he is very quick to say, you want me to beat him up? I can beat him up for you. You want me to? Just say the word. And even today, if you leave a mean comment in my Facebook feed, he will send me a message saying, you want me to beat him up? And I think he's only maybe half joking. I think he does this because he was the oldest sibling in a family that went through some difficult times, and he never felt totally safe. And he wanted to make sure his younger siblings always felt that safety he didn't. And he has made me feel more safe than anyone else in my life, but not because of all those offers to beat people up. If anything, those made things catastrophically worse. We have some famous family stories of some troubles caused by that. No, he made me feel safe in other ways. The first day of kindergarten, when he walked me to my class to make sure I got there safe. Or when we got lost once as kids, and he was the one who had the courage to go find an adult and ask for directions. Or the time we were playing a really competitive game of recess basketball, and I took an elbow to the face, and he sat out on the sidelines with me, even though it meant our team would probably lose, to make sure I was okay. Or a difficult family moment, a moment of crisis, where my parents were dealing with their own stuff, and he was the one who noticed how scared I was and came and gave me a hug and promised me that everything was going to be okay. My brother is big and strong and a professional martial artist, and he could probably kick most people's butts. But he makes me feel safe with his gentleness and with his care. And I think too often in the public imagination, when we think about safety, we think about a use of force. But that true moments of safety come in different ways. They come when our physical needs are cared for. They come when our emotional needs are cared for. They come when, in moments when we're hurting or feeling vulnerable, someone cares for us. They come in those spaces where there's enough trust that we feel free to express our truest selves. And so for our centering today, I want you to call up into your imagination a moment when you felt truly safe. And I want you to sink into that moment. Really try to feel it viscerally in your body. Feel how often safety is about the absence of aggression. No adrenaline rushing, an easing of tension, a relaxation of your muscles, a feeling of tenderness and of care. And breathe into that feeling for a moment. And if you're so moved, you could share your memory in our chat. I would love to hear the times when you felt safe. And now, I want you to think about what unique qualities you have that can make other people feel safe. Safety comes in so many forms. And we all have the ability to give other people that sensation of true safety. So breathe with that power that you hold, a power that is so much more powerful than force. And let's just breathe there and settle into this moment.
As some of those moments of feeling cared for tenderly are shared in the chat, I'd like to invite you to recall that one of the purposes of our sharing of joys and sorrows, one of perhaps the purposes of prayer, is to find the experience of being held in community, to find that experience of tenderness and care, not just from an individual, but from an entire gathering of souls who are together holding our struggles and our joys and our sorrows. And to remember that that is what we do for each other, that we are creating a safe place for the soul to come forth and thrive when we hold one another in all of our joys and in all of our sorrows. And so we're now going to enter the portion of our service where we share the joys and sorrows of our community and practice that holding. I'm going to begin by sharing a couple of joys and sorrows submitted on our website, and then I'll invite those gathered to share your joys and sorrows in the chat. Let us join our hearts with Margot Lindener and many among our community here at the Unitarian Universalist Church who grieve the loss of our Minister Emerita, Gertrude Lindener Stosky, who died peacefully on Friday afternoon with her daughter nearby. Gertrude was our minister from 1980 to 1986, our congregation's very first minister. She was a pioneer in our faith, one of only 21 women who were ordained in all of Unitarian Universalism in 1968. And she now joins a great cloud of ancestors and witnesses, and we celebrate her life. We also join with one in our community who shares concern and care for our trans and non-binary beloveds and kin after policy changes from the administration that threaten their health and access to health care. We lament and rage about this and recommit ourselves to support and resourcing solidarity and love, to being that tender care. I now invite your joys and sorrows in the chat, and I will attempt to read as many as I can, as together from homes across our city and county and state and country, we hold one another in love.
I'm going to skip the joys and sorrows from Columbia because we will have our own joys and concerns in our social hour after this service is over. And it's a little bit of question of time. So I'm going to see if I can move this forward. Yeah. All right, let's try that.
Circle round for freedom, circle round for peace, for all of us imprisoned. Circle for release, circle for the planet, circle for its soul, for the children of our children. Keep the circle whole. Circle round for freedom. Circle round for peace. For all of us imprisoned. Circle for release. Circle for the planet. Circle for its soul. For the children of our children. Keep the circle whole. Circle round for freedom. Circle round for peace. For all of us imprisoned. Circle for release. Circle for the planet. Circle for its soul. For the children of our children. Keep the circle whole.
Our reading this week is the poem The First Week by Laura Eberly, who describes herself as a facilitator and healer, creating spaces for collective healing and liberation, and a queer white person on a journey to undo her own racism. The first week. If we all agreed to, on Monday, we could plant a pollinator garden on every corner and turn over one parking spot per block to vegetables and fruit. But first, on Sunday, we should assemble all the healers, all the yogis, chiropractors, sangomas, and sage smudgers, and ask them to have coffee with the matriarchs and the refugees and the trans sex workers and the small town queers and anyone who has yelled at a marble building through a bullhorn or raised a child in times of war. By lunchtime, all of us would learn to locate, heal, and fortify our spines. That evening, the musicians would find our diaphragms and teach us new songs to sing while planting. On Tuesday, after the gardens, we would repair every roof, install rain barrels and solar panels, retrieve the lost balls and frisbees and kites, and remember that we are tiny beneath the sky. On Wednesday, we'd fix heaters so the gas could never be cut off and install a tiny lead filter in every faucet. By Thursday, we would know each other's names and begin to tell our stories. Then the farmers and the roofers and the plumbers would be honored by the lawyers and the doctors who had spent their first week ever listening. Next, venerations, reparations by the bankers and professors who will learn that education isn't learning and money isn't value and nothing is the feel of soil in your hands or throwing back your head to sing. We will ache for love and owning nothing, and for the first time, that will make us unafraid. By Friday, we will be too busy healing, tending, and child rearing for waging war. So the soldiers will have no orders. The police will have quiet radios and no calls. So we will tear apart the prisons and send the guards to rehab, where first graders and nursery workers will teach them slowly to trust humanity again, beginning with their own. We will use the bricks and fences to build community centers with wide porches where grannies can knit and keep watch instead. Saturday would be for rest, hammocks, creeks, and lemonade. We would listen to the earth and the spirits and our ancestors and our lovers and our beloveds and the bullfrogs and the songbirds and the tall grass and the redwoods and the oak trees, breathing for one day every week. Breathing. And by next Sunday, we would know who else we would need.
Historians will talk about May 2020 for So many reasons. But one important thread may well be, as a Twitter hot take described it, the moment a nation under quarantine turned from learning about sourdough to learning about police abolition. Inspired by the work of generations and by righteous outrage at a smirking white officer with a knee on George Floyd's precious neck, protesters took to the streets across the country and world to once again defend and declare the preciousness of Black lives. Police responded, as they often do, with militarized force. This time, however, the tanks and tear gas, the rubber bullets and flash grenades were not limited to one community like in Ferguson of 2014. This time, in city after city, we saw brutality against nonviolent protesters again and again. Minneapolis, Philadelphia, New York, Seattle, Los Angeles, Louisville, Atlanta, the list goes on. A cloud drive set up to receive cell phone videos of unprovoked police violence received 400 clips from coast to coast in one night. One left-leaning news outlet ran a piece on May 31st with the headline, "Police erupt in violence nationwide." For many white folks, this has been a moment of awakening, with horror witnessing the police as an occupying force, militarized in neighborhoods across the country. Black Americans remind us that in many of their communities, this occupation is simply business as usual. Of course, no community is a monolith, and police and prison abolition are not the automatic response to this truth, nor are they necessarily the majority view in any community. So radical, so unimaginable can they seem. But suddenly, in this moment, communities of every identity are grappling with a rising call built upon decades of organizing to #defund the police. Suddenly, prison abolition doesn't seem quite as wild as it once did. Suddenly, Minneapolis is actively disbanding their police department to replace it with community-driven strategies for public safety. And across the country, we are having hard, good conversations about what safety and thriving is and can be to include everyone. The poet Andrea Gibson shared a verse yesterday that expressed the desire to build a day where grief need not be the midwife who pulls truth into the light. I invite white folks to join me in lament that it could take such brutality to awaken us. But let us get to work while we are awake. It took me about 20 years to get there, but I now call myself an abolitionist. Because I am white, my learning about policing and the criminal justice system was late and slow and extended, rather than early, quick, and decisive as it generally is for my peers of color. Indeed, Maurice Mitchell, a Black man who directs the Working Families Party nationally, writes, "If you have trouble imagining the concept of police abolition, look no further than the many live experiments being played out in upper middle-class white suburbs across the country, where people carry on their lives with little to no interaction with law enforcement. Not because there is less harm or drug use or theft happening in these communities, but because these communities are just not policed. They are invested in instead." I grew up in one such middle-class white neighborhood, and I had little to no contact with police until I started attending a historically Black high school on Tulsa's north side. Before I began attending that school, I grew up learning that police were there to protect me. I didn't understand until later that my safety depended far less on policing than on the resources available to my family and my neighbors. I didn't understand until later what I believe now, that our criminal justice and policing system gave me an illusion of protection and safety by criminalizing and oppressing entire swaths of my human kin. I certainly didn't realize the cost. But through the love of my best friend when I was 15, a biracial boy who told us the craziest stories about his encounters with police, and of course by that I mean horrifying, I began at that age to wake up. And from the influence of amazing organizers I've met in the last 10 years and some important reading I've done along the way, I eventually became a fledgling police and prison abolitionist in the flesh. And today, I want to tell you some of the things that I have learned from the generous emotional labor of Black friends and neighbors and colleagues, from the loving agitation of Black and white activists, and from the writing of scholars and organizers and my own life experience. So I want to begin with two important points of groundwork. First, there is no such thing as blue lives. Policing is a job, not a marginalized identity. A person who works as a police officer can dress in plain clothes, even on the job, and can go home and take off their uniform and their role at the end of the day. Black and Indigenous folks and people of color cannot shed the social constructs of their identity in this way. Abolishing police doesn't mean abolishing people who work as police, any more than abolishing slavery meant abolishing the people who had been enslaved, much as Southern enslavers might have tried to make it so. The call is to abolish a practice, not individual people engaged in that practice who are, of course, both diverse and human. In fact, abolitionists generally believe that abolishing police would ultimately serve the well-being of those who now work as police by freeing them of the moral injury of their work enforcing control and inequality. The second important point of groundwork is that the field of police and prison abolition is vast, well-researched, creatively theorized, experimentally practiced, and deeply analyzed. This research and theory, analysis, and praxis has been thoughtfully labored over for generations, particularly by Black feminists like Angela Davis, Mariame Kaba, Ruth Wilson Gilmore, and others. For me, this truth yields several important reminders. First, but what about this that I can think of has almost certainly been addressed at length in this scholarship, praxis, and activism, and it is mine to learn before dismissing out of hand. Second, communities most impacted by policing are experts in their experience and profoundly situated to imagine something more life-giving for their communities. If I can't imagine it, perhaps that is the best signal to me that my job is to uplift those who can and are. Third, I cannot possibly do justice to this topic in one sermon. I'm really only getting at policing, missing out on the whole field of prison abolition and immigration abolition, and I will warn you even then that it's kind of a long sermon, so maybe refill your coffee, look out for a study group as well. But here we go. Contemporary abolition is based in several key understandings. The first is that policing, prison, and the justice system in America are inextricably linked with violent colonization, predatory capitalism, and white supremacy in America, to the extent that these systems are rotten in their very roots. In an opinion piece in the New York Times this week, abolitionist movement leader Mariame Kaba points out, there is not a single era in United States history in which the police were not a force of violence against Black people. Policing in the South emerged from the slave patrols that caught and returned runaway slaves. In the North, the first municipal police departments in the mid-1800s helped quash labor strikes and riots against the rich. Everywhere across history, they have suppressed marginalized populations to protect the status quo, end quote. Abolitionists point out that suppressing marginalized people is not an aberration from the intent of policing. From its very beginning, it is the intent of policing. And unequal policing is not an aberration either. Policing was intended from the beginning, created to abet and support inequality by supporting the well-being of the wealthy white elite. And even if violent suppression is not the explicit intent of individuals in leadership of police departments now, culture and history and systemic intent will overwhelm individual desire every time. We have seen over decades that violent and suppressive policing is like invasive honeysuckle. Unless you kill the roots, it just keeps growing back. Secondly, the abolition framework has a clear critique of the social construction of crime, pointing out that most of the crime addressed by policing is simply the product of folks trying to get by in communities that have been systematically plundered of the resources needed to survive. 80% of arrests nationwide are for low-level misdemeanors, many of which are basically the crime of being poor. Meanwhile, the white wealthy elite engage in millions of dollars of wage theft annually, impoverishing those very communities, and corporations loot us all through mostly legal means. Even when we look to violent crime, we might remember that police kill Black men in St. Louis at a rate higher than the national murder rate. And an entire municipal and state government have been poisoning the population of Flint, Michigan for years with total impunity. Almost universally, policing as a practice serves not to protect us from, but to maintain an unequal and violent capitalist system. In addition to this critique, abolitionists point out that policing has expanded almost exponentially in recent decades, extending insidiously into most areas of social service, controlling homeless populations, answering mental health crises, addressing substance dependencies, educating neighborhood disagreements, and more, things for which police are neither well-trained nor well-equipped. Not only is there a convincing argument that armed officers escalate rather than helping in many of these situations, but there is a larger systemic problem that when we believe policing is the best answer to our ills, we send all of our money into police departments and then wring our hands that there is nothing to be done to alleviate all of the interlocking suffering our community experiences from that lack of resourcing. Thirdly, contemporary abolitionism rejects the strategy of reforming police. In the abolitionist framework, reforming policing is a refusal to understand the way policing is set up specifically to support the status quo and to suppress and criminalize marginalized populations. For abolitionists, better policing isn't better. The goal is social support and thriving and no one being policed. Now, abolitionists know that we won't do away with police departments and prisons tomorrow, but they are clear that any changes we make to the current system must be geared toward diminishing the power of the police, believing this is the only thing that will diminish unchecked violence. Changes to current policing practices are advocated by abolitionists only if they reduce funding for police or the number of police, or if they significantly limit the power of police by unequivocally ending various practices. So for instance, an abolitionist would advocate for banning chokeholds and for firing officers who exercise violent practices. But most abolitionists don't support mandating body cameras, which represent a huge additional financial investment in police departments and have been shown actually not to reduce the instance of uses of force. Abolitionists point out that police departments actually benefit from moderate reformism because small or medium-sized reforms tend to take public pressure off like a release valve and often direct even more financial resources toward police departments. So take community policing. Our community has been pushing for this model for years. But an abolitionist would ask, what will it really do? Send more police into neighborhoods that are already over-policed in the guise of building better relationships? How do you build a better relationship with someone whose essential job is to protect those who are plundering from your community? The community policing model also requires an even larger investment of money in police personnel. We've seen this over and over in Colombia. The argument for why we don't have community policing is that we don't have enough police. We have to give more money to the department. We have to pay more. And so community policing actually doubles down on the idea that policing is the answer, rather than pouring those same resources into safe housing, addiction treatment services, youth jobs, and other social supports. Now, I want to tell you here that this point about reform has been the very hardest thing for me to wrap my mind around in my journey of learning about abolition. Surely reducing the harm of the police is a worthy goal, by any means necessary. The abolitionist answer is yes, reducing the harm of the police is a worthy goal, but there are 100 ways we will be told we can reduce harm that actually sends more resources to the form of policing that exists, and which then creates an intractable cycle of needing more and more policing. According to the abolitionist view, the way to reduce harm is to reduce policing and pour the resources back into our communities. This leads me to the fourth and most important point. Contemporary abolitionism theorizes and practices alternatives to policing and prison, imagining community care and community safety, transformative justice practices, and restorative justice. Abolishing policing doesn't mean we leave people in harm's way. It means we find more generative ways to care for each other. And so abolitionism at its core is not actually a vision of removal, but a vision of abundance for communities that already exist. Movement leader Dr. Ruth Wilson Gilmore says, abolition is about presence. It is a theory of change, a theory of social life. It's about making things, replacing unjust systems with ones that support us. It's about ensuring that we resolve inequalities rather than upholding them, and ensuring that people have what they need before they harm each other. In her piece for The Times that I mentioned earlier, Mariam Kaba writes, when people, especially white people, consider a world without the police, they envision a society as violent as our current one, nearly without law enforcement, and they shudder. As a society, we've been so indoctrinated with the idea that we solve problems by policing and caging people that many cannot imagine anything other than prisons and police as solutions to violence and harm. People like me who want to abolish prisons and police, she writes, have a vision of a different society, built on cooperation instead of individualism, on mutual aid instead of self-preservation. What would the country look like if it had billions of extra dollars to spend on housing, food, and education for all? This change in society wouldn't happen immediately, but the protests show that many people are ready to embrace a different vision of safety and justice. The thing I most want to tell you about abolitionism today is that it is an act of creative imagination, an act of what we can create for thriving for our communities. So I'm going to show you a few thoughts about this different vision from activists in Minneapolis. These are slides with simple illustrations that share ideas for what might replace policing. I'm going to read them out loud, so it's no problem if you can't see them. Oops. Will someone tell me in the chat if you can see the slide? It seems like maybe not. Okay, so I'm gonna read them anyways. Someone is talking to themselves on the bus. Imagine they ride the bus without being bothered. An hour later, they are at their destination and going on with their day. Isn't that public safety? You are experiencing intimate partner violence. Imagine texting a number and a trauma-informed crisis intervention specialist meets you in a safe place. An hour later, you are working together to make a plan that will keep you safe long term. Okay, I'm seeing that there's trouble with my PowerPoint. I'm going to try again. I'm going to stop sharing them and just read them to you. The graphics are nice, but not worth delaying us. Imagine someone is selling drugs to youth who are overdosing. Imagine being connected to a substance use service that intervenes in harmful drug transactions. Youth are supported in healthy outcomes and the seller takes accountability for harm. Isn't that public safety? Incidents of gun violence are rising in the neighborhood. Imagine a trauma-informed crisis intervention team works with community activists to disarm and de-escalate conflicts. People doing harm are connected to services that address the underlying problem. Isn't that public safety? Someone seems to be snooping in car windows on your block. Imagine calling your neighbors who are trained in de-escalation and approaching the person. An hour later, the conflict is resolved and the person responsible is getting what they actually need. Isn't that public safety? Your friends are intoxicated and fighting, but you don't want them to get in trouble. Imagining you call 311 and a crisis intervention team comes to your door. An hour later, your friends are sleeping it off at home. Isn't that public safety? You are experiencing a mental health crisis and afraid. Imagine you call 311 and a first responder trained in mental health comes to your door. An hour later, you are in a safe place with your consent with plans for follow-up care. Isn't that public safety? Some folks are sleeping on benches in the park. Imagine a city employee comes by and checks in to see if they need a place to sleep, food, water, or health care. An hour later, those who want a different place to sleep have one. Isn't that public safety? And then the final slide, and someone's asking, I will share these on Facebook, is a picture of lavender flowers and a quote from Ruth Wilson Gilmore that says, "Abolition is about presence, not absence. It is about building life-affirming institutions." So what does our faith have to say about all of this? Unitarian Universalism has an essential faith claim to add to this conversation. Our universalism reminds us again and again that none of us are free until all of us are free. None of us can thrive until the most vulnerable of us is thriving. And our Unitarian forebears always called us to human ingenuity and creativity and imagination. It is ours in this moment to imagine a community where safety and thriving are universally shared. And where we can't imagine, it is ours to support and uplift those who can. Part of the success of supremacy systems is that they grant one group of people an illusion of safety and thriving through the violent control of others. But we know that that is not real thriving. Our faith has in its heart a call to overcome that illusion, to realize that all our human lives are both intertwined and contingent, and that the spiritual cost of a false safety is the imprisonment of our souls. There is a hard spiritual truth below this conversation, which is that we will never be truly safe from all harm in this world. Something bad could happen to us or our loved ones. But if we cannot be truly safe from harm, we can be truly held, truly accompanied, truly loved, truly protected as much as it is possible, while recognizing that none of our offers of control, none of our attempts at control will bring real safety. The way to live with wholeness in this spiraling dance of love and fear is to always turn back toward love. This is why I believe pondering the questions and challenges of abolitionism is spiritual work. We are called to sink into the existential truth that we cannot control the world unfolding around us, and that the ways we try harms people. We are called to imagine instead how we can love each other more freely, more generatively, and more universally. What abolitionists are saying right now is that there is a world breathing under this one, where it is actually possible for us to thrive outside the logic of control, where we can extend our promise of being held beyond ourselves to more and more beloved kin, where we can literally resource love and nurturing over fear. That is truly the definition of abolition. We can resource love and thriving more than fear. Can you imagine? I'd like to invite you to spend some time imagining while we listen to a song produced by our UUA organizing office for their UU the Vote efforts. It's a song by a group called Mamuse called We Shall Be Known. And it's all about this moment of turning, and can we turn toward thriving? If you'd like to share imaginings about safety in the chat, you're welcome to. And we're going to now share this musical anthem. And Linda, if you'll go one back, that should be the right one.
Away, heaven knows where we are going, but we know we will.
Linda, if you could pause and go back to the slide, that would be great. Thank you. I may be able to share it here. Thank you for your patience with us this morning, folks. I'm going to go ahead and share from my computer.
We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle around to tend these fires. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change alive from deep within the earth. It is time now. It is time now that we thrive. It is time we lead ourselves into the well.
All right, I didn't want to miss out on that song, so thank you for your patience as we worked out the kinks. I'm going to share during our offering in the chat a couple of resources for learning more about abolition. I want to invite you to imagine the personal work around grappling with some of these ideas. If you're ready to grapple with some of these ideas, maybe the next piece of personal work is imagining what you could do instead of calling the police in various situations. The UUA is calling on our congregations to imagine what our congregations could do to make sure that we have a plan for community safety that doesn't involve policing. And our, of course, local context is unfolding with a coalition of folks, a coalition of protesters and organizations gathering their demands for what we envision for community safety in our community. And I'll keep you posted on those as well. It's a time for us to learn and to imagine together. So now is the time in our service when we join in the spiritual practice of generosity, guiding our hearts away from fear and scarcity, and remembering that it is by sharing and supporting one another that we feel most human. This morning's offering is a regular offering for the work of our congregation, which we know to be so vital in our lives right now. As you are guided toward the link for giving, we will play a video of a recording of the song Wo Ya Ya from our Teal hymnal, as recorded by musician Leah Morris with the choir of the UU Church of Silver Spring, Maryland. So I now invite your generous offerings for the ongoing work of our beloved congregation.
We are going, heaven knows where we are going, but we know we will. We are going, heaven knows where we are going. We know we're there, we will get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we will. We are going, heaven knows where we are going. We know we're there, we will get there. Heaven knows how we will get there. We know we will. It will be hard, we know, and the road will be muddy and rough, but we'll get there. Heaven knows how we will get there. We know we will. It will be hard, we know, and the road will be muddy and rough, but we'll get there. Heaven knows how we will get
Friends, before we part from one another with our closing words, I'd like to give you a reminder from our board president, Mindy McPherson. She would like to remind you that your ballots for our annual meeting are due in 3 days. So we need you to get those in the mail today. We need a We're going to sing our benediction. I'm noting that somebody can't copy the link that I posted, so you might want to just click on it and then bookmark it, and I will also post it in our Facebook group. And I get to lead us in singing our benediction today because Jeremy's not able to be with us today, so I'll try and choose a good key again this time. And I invite you to join me from home. You might wish to put a hand over your heart or hold the hands of those whom you are with in your home. Now on leaving one another, may we give of hand and heart. Let us share our benediction lovingly before we part. And go in peace to coffee hour, where you can see everyone and chat with everyone. Sam notes that we have 26 of the 51 needed ballots. Sam, there are 2 here at the church, so we still need 23 of you to send your ballot.
That's it, Betty.
So I invite you all to unmute yourself and greet each other. In a moment, I will play our own bell on our
I
share.
Way over here? Okay.
Like we are unmuted.
Betty, you there?
I'm good. How are you?
So there are a lot of people who are not on camera.
Yeah, I am. They're just doing a social hour now, so I'd like to do that.
Oh, I'm on. No idea. Come on.
Okay.
Okay, now,
Yeah, I'm going to mute us so we can have our announcements of our own. Welcome to Social Hour, everyone. So this is, I realize, 10 minutes longer than usual, but I hope you enjoyed that experience as much as I did. We have a few announcements to make of our own, and then we will do our own little chalice lighting and honor some joys and concerns, do a little offering of our own, and have some small social time with each other in breakout rooms. So that's our plan for the social hour. The meditation ministry group will continue to meet on Thursday evenings at 7:30 on Zoom. The links to all of these Zoom meetings were in your your final June bell notes. So check back there to actually follow the links. Our staff is on vacation, but many of these things are continuing with lay leadership. I'm really proud of our deep bench of lay leaders in our congregation. Lynn Jakowski will continue to lead activities for artists of all talents on most Friday mornings at 10 a.m. through to the end of August. The Writing Escape group, led by Nora Hussey, will continue to meet on Thursdays at 11 a.m. on Zoom. And the Caregivers Support Group will be meeting July 19th and August 16th at 10 a.m. on Zoom. Finally, just to be clear, the church is still closed for congregational activities until the end of September, even though the Needham Children's Center has reopened. Please, if you need to contact the church office, use phones or email, and be aware that Susanna will be back in the office this week with reduced hours for the rest of the summer and only present on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So please be patient with voicemail and email. If you do need pastoral care, you can call at any time and leave a voice message at the church office. So with that, let us see our chalice and cup of water. We will silently light a chalice for the sharing of joys and concerns. And as we do so, you're invited to light your own at home if you wish. How are we doing, Becky?
It's Rebecca.
So you have to make me host, Phil. I can't move around.
But there's the chalice lighting.
There you go.
And then, so Buffy Duhigg is our pastoral care associate for this coming week, and she will lead us with the joys and sorrows of today.
Time to share the milestones of our lives with one another. You are invited to share the chat what is giving you joy or sorrow at this time. Please share only your own life or the life of someone you hold dear. I have two to start us off with. One is from Beth Sargent, and I'm going to read what she sent. I was furloughed along with 15 other employees when Norwood Hospital was forced to close down from flooding at the end of June. The plan is to reopen as soon as the repairs can be made and the opening. It didn't print all out, so this is going to be sketchy. I'm sorry, I didn't notice that. We have been informed that it may take several months to accomplish the work and is to remain closed at this time. Many staff members are really hurting at this time, and I ask for your thoughts and prayers, if you do, and positive energy to be sent in their direction as we all do what we can to make it through this challenging time. And we'd like another pebble to be put in for Suzanne Pelton and her family, Peter and Leslie Nichols and their children. Peter has been diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. He is being treated with radiation at this time. And are there any in the chat? I don't see any new ones in the chat room. So I guess we will add one final silent stone to honor all those joys not yet ready to be shared or concerns held still closely in our hearts. Please join in a moment of prayer and contemplation as we extend our thoughts towards one another.
Thank you, Buffy. So this is our time to practice the spiritual ritual of generosity, as Molly mentioned. You may have given to their collection for the Columbia, Missouri congregation, which is totally appropriate. I'm always glad to lend support to other congregations especially when we've enjoyed their worship service made so generously available to us. On the other hand, we too are in need of financial support, and even as we struggle with the challenges of this time of pandemic, we continue to share our plate collection with important local social services. This summer, in July and August, our plate collection is shared equally between First Parish and the Needham Community Council. So if you want to send something to our collection or to pay something towards your annual pledge for either this year or the year just completed or the new fiscal year, FY21, you can see on your screen the instructions on how to do the text to give. Or you can just write a check and mail it to First Parish, or you can go to our website and use the giving tab there. All very much appreciated. So we're going to play a musical interlude while your offering is generously given and gratefully received. They're not seeing it. They're seeing it. What do they see? See this thing. Okay, so now's our chance to actually break into small breakout rooms. Becky will create rooms of 5 or 6 people each and let you say good morning to your friends and parishioners for about 15 minutes. After that point, it'll come back to the main room. We've had one final announcement I want to add before you go. Jim Sargent and Beth are working with Jeanette, and Tom Gaiman, our techie behind the scenes extraordinaire, are setting up to have our August 2nd service, not in the sanctuary, but outside on the front lawn, but live streamed, the way our worship cafe used to be live streamed. And we'll be able to see it on YouTube through that live streaming. So hold good weather in your hearts and prayers for August 2nd. We're looking forward to that. So without further ado, Becky, let us go greet each other. Thank you.